So happy Pi Day, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to start off by dropping the recipe into the chat box in case anybody is cooking along. So that should have gone through. So it's a PDF you should be able to open. All right. So today's Pi Day. It's also Daylight Savings Day. Happy all these holidays to everybody. Today for Pi Day, we're going to be making pizza pies, which is one of my favorite pie-shaped foods to be eating. And we're going to be doing a Greek-themed pizza pie for a couple different reasons. The first reason is, yes, these could absolutely be made with a sauce and cheese traditional pie recipe, traditional pizza pie, but nobody really needs to come to a cooking class to learn how to put sauce and cheese on something. So this Greek-style pizza is going to be a little bit of a twist on a classic, and it's also going to give us the opportunity to really load this up with vegetables. The third reason is that we're going to get the opportunity to make my favorite Greek yogurt sauce, which I'm so excited to share with you. It's great on everything. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So if anybody's cooking along, you can follow along with me. If not, you can always do this later. So we're going to start with prepping some of our veggies. So I've got 2 of these little snacking cucumbers. These are my absolute favorite cucumbers. Could you use a regular cucumber? Absolutely. I like the little ones. They're really fresh tasting, but if you wanted to use the full-size one, you could. So for these, I'm just going to quarter them up really quick and slice them into little chunks. So quarter them up and then maybe like a ½ inch for each of them. And all of these we're going to put into a colander set over a large mixing bowl. You've got your bowl and your colander. You're going to throw all of those cucumbers into this little bowl. Hopefully everybody's starting with clean hands. We always wash our hands before we start cooking. And then the next thing that we're going to do is cut some of these cherry tomatoes in half. So I like to use a serrated knife for cherry tomatoes because it's just a good way to not mush them all over the place. So sometimes if you use a straight blade, they don't always like to cut very evenly. All right, so while these are in here, we're going to combine them with a little pinch of salt. And the reason for that, if you attended the Heart Healthy Reducing Your Salt presentation that we did a couple weeks ago, you'll remember that salt is to make food taste more like itself. So we don't necessarily want these tasting salty. We're only going to do a little bitty pinch of salt. We're going to sprinkle it all over these tomatoes and cucumbers. And what that's going to do is that salt is going to get into the cell walls of these veggies and start releasing some of the flavors. So we don't want them necessarily salty, but what's going to happen is a lot of the fluid is going to come out down into the bowl, and they are going to taste more tomatoey and more cucumbery than if we hadn't done this little salting step. So we're going to set these aside for a little bit, and next we're going to get our tortillas ready to go. So this recipe is great for a snack. 3 p.m. is a great time to have a little snack between lunch and dinner so you're not starving when dinner time comes around. Or these can be a really nice lunch. So if you're looking for something a little bit outside of the box, these are a really good tool to have in your pocket for a really fast and easy lunch. You can also beef them up a little bit for dinner. If you want to add a little bit of beans or meat, you can do that for making them into a more hearty dinner. So I've got 4 tortillas on a baking sheet, and then we'll be doing about a ¼ cup of mozzarella onto each one. Now, if you were making these as a sauce and cheese pizza, I would also recommend putting the mozzarella on first and the tomato sauce on second, because this mozzarella is going to be making a nice barrier so that these tortillas get nice and crispy without getting soggy. So the cheese forms a nice little layer to prevent any sogginess. So we've got about a ¼ cup on each of these. And then I'm going to take some Italian seasoning and just do a little pinch of that on each of them. About a ¼ teaspoon of really any kind of seasoning that you want. I've done this before with za'atar, which is a Middle Eastern seasoning blend, which is fantastic on these. All right, so these puppies are all ready to go in the oven. So hopefully your oven's preheated to 400 degrees. And pop these in just like this.
Better cheese.
I'm going to set a timer for 8 minutes. to make sure that I don't burn them. All right, 8 minutes. And go. All right, so while those are baking, what they're going to do is they're going to crisp up really nicely and puff up a little bit. So while that's happening, we're going to make our yogurt sauce. So we are starting with some Greek yogurt. So you want about half a cup of Greek yogurt. I'm just going to eyeball it. It's about half a cup of Greek yogurt, and this is going to give us a wonderful sauce, but it also packs quite the protein punch, which is fantastic for a quick and easy meal. So into this, we're going to put 1 to 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. If you like, you can do a little bit more. I always suggest tasting it to see if you like how it is. So we're going to do a teaspoon of lemon juice. I know I like it with 2 teaspoons, so I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. And then we're going to do 2 teaspoons of olive oil, using the same measuring spoon to do my 2 teaspoons of olive oil to give it a nice savory flavor to this yogurt. And one ingredient that you can give or take in this, take it or leave it, I guess, in this recipe is honey. So I'm going to use it in this recipe because it functions to really tone down the acidity of the tomatoes a little bit. But I also wanted to show you this trick. I just measured my olive oil in this measuring cup without wiping it. I'm going to put the honey straight on top of the leftover oil. 1 teaspoon of honey, and it's just going to plop right out. Pretty easy, and you don't have to worry about scraping your measuring spoon. All right, we'll do a little bit of garlic in here. Now I'm going to use a fresh clove of garlic. You could also use garlic powder. The fresh garlic does tend to be a little bit strong since we're not cooking this garlic, so make sure you're using a small piece of garlic. I like to grate it on the microplane for the sauce. If you use a lot of garlic in the sauce, it can be really strong because this garlic does not get cooked. All right. And then finally, we're going to finish this off with a little bit of salt and pepper. So you can really use your best judgment here. Go a little bit lighter. And since this recipe has a lot of other salts from the feta and from the cucumbers, I'm only going to be doing a teeny tiny bit of salt in this one. All right, and now we'll stir that up. So that's really our yogurt sauce. Just those couple ingredients. And looking pretty good. Stir it up. Any questions at this point? Any interjections? Cool.
You mentioned feta.
Yes, we are going to be doing feta. So let's pull out all of our toppings. So for this, we've got our Greek yogurt. It's a little bit of a dairy heavy recipe. So we have Greek yogurt and mozzarella, and then we also have feta cheese. We've got, of course, our vegetables, and then you can do a little bit of herbs. I have a little bit of cilantro here because that's what I have left over, but also parsley, dill, basil, any of that would be fantastic on top. And the other thing that you can do on top is another handful of greens. So I've got a little bit of kale here, and lettuce would be great. Spring mix would be great. Kale is what I happen to have. So I'm going to just dress this very lightly with a little bit more olive oil. Kind of toss that around a little bit. So that's going to go on there on top as well. So we're just waiting for our tortillas to crisp up. Then we'll top them and enjoy. So a couple other ideas for what you could do for this. If you aren't into the dairy heavy sort of meal, you could always leave out one of the dairies. If you're looking for another way to add a little bit more protein, you could use some leftover chicken or some leftover beef or steak to round these out to make them a bit more of a more complex meal. If you are wanting to make them a little bit on the healthier side, I believe you could do this with a whole wheat tortilla. We're using white today because that's how I've tested this recipe before, but I think a whole wheat tortilla would also crisp up in a similar way. Some other themes you could do for these pizzas, like I said, you could do sauce and cheese. You could do like a Mexican themed black bean and cheddar one. That'd be less of a pizza and more of a quesadilla, but you can still crisp up your tortilla in the same way. Anybody else have any ideas for what we could do with these pizzas? we got 3 minutes left on our tortillas.
Do you use on the Greek yogurt, do you use full yogurt or lower fat?
It depends what you're doing with it. So since we're putting olive oil into this, low fat would make sense. This happens to be 2% because that's what they had at the store. But I'd recommend doing a low fat yogurt if you're going to be putting olive oil into it. If you want to not put olive oil into it, you could absolutely do a full fat or 2% for the yogurt. You could also make these Greek pizzas a little bit more Greek by adding things like olives or artichokes or some red onion, some capers, whatever other ingredients you have could also go into these.
Would you put it back in the oven after you top it or
Nope. So we want these ingredients to be fresh and crisp. So these ones are going to go on cold and everything else is going to be cooked in the oven. So just the cheese melted on tortillas and then you throw stuff on top. You can throw a salad on top. Super quick, super easy. All right, let's see how these babies are doing. We need another 30 seconds.
how much feta do you use?
There is a half a cup in this recipe, so it's about 2 tablespoons per little tortilla. Some other uses for this yogurt sauce, I love to put it on any sort of bowls that we're having, any sort of grain bowls. It's really great with sweet potatoes and chicken and maybe a little broccoli with some of this to kind of round out your meal. It's really great with beans. So I do chickpeas, sweet potatoes, and yogurt sauce sometimes is a favorite. It's really nice and adaptable. You can do a lot of different things with this yogurt sauce. You can put some herbs into it. If you're having fish, a little bit of dill in this can make a really nice topping for fish. If you are having burrito bowls, a little bit of paprika can make it really nice. For the burrito bowls, I like to use lime juice instead of lemon juice because that gives it a little bit of a Southwestern tang.
Oh, that would be with fish.
All right, I think that our tortillas are ready. So let's see how these look. They look perfect. All right. So you can see these babies are a little bit puffed up. They're nice and crispy, and the cheese is starting to brown just a little bit. You could leave them in a little longer if you wanted to brown them a little bit more. I'm choosing the absolute puffiest one to make. So we'll start by putting a little bit of our cucumbers and tomatoes. By now, they should have drained a little bit underneath so that you might get a little bit of liquid. Not quite. This liquid underneath you can mix 1 to 1 with olive oil, and there you have some salad dressing, voila. So we'll do a little bit of the cucumbers and tomatoes on top. That's all cucumbers. There we go. Then a little bit of your feta cheese. I'm going to put some cilantro. A little bit of my olive oil and kale. And a plop of yogurt sauce. This is a great snack. I would say 1 of these would be a good snack. 2 of these would be a good lunch. And that's all. Happy Pie Day, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. That looks amazing.
You coming over?
Absolutely.
I have 3 more of these.
Yeah, I know. Perfect.
So, all right. Well, happy Pie Day, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Hope. Can I ask a quick question before you sign off?
Sure.
So, if I have my tomatoes and cucumbers and they're like draining and then they have a little bit of salt on them, like how quickly do you need to use them?
You could even eat them the next day. It just depends on how you like them. So the next day they might be a little bit limp, but they'll still taste amazing.
Okay, but like if I waited until like 6:30 this evening, so like in 3 hours, they're still going to be fine.
I think they'll still be crisp and good. Yeah, I'd stick them back in the fridge. I wouldn't let them sit
Okay.
on the counter anymore.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. This was really fun.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Fred. Take care. Hope you do
Okay.
well.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, that was fun.